A brief warning to our audio listeners. We're trying something different out here. We're trying some multimedia stuff. So if you hear any of these two sounds, or it means there are 10 seconds left, or we're moving on to the next team. Right, back to the scheduled programming. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rugby with Pads. Now, for those of you watching on YouTube, you might notice something a little bit different. Up to my right here, your left, I guess, I have a timer. Now, this is going to be the concept of the episode. Today, we're going to do a Around the NFL recap. This was something that I was hoping to record at a head-to-head, but unfortunately schedules just wouldn't allow. But for those of you who watch or listen to the Around the NFL podcast, which is a fantastic podcast for general NFL fun, I guess. That sounds really lame, but it's a really good, informative show. It's probably not quite as deep as The Ringer or The Athletic or others, but yeah, it's a really good show, and it's probably where I get a lot of my kind of takes from, I guess. But they do a concept called Around the AFC and Around the NFC in 48 minutes. They do 3 minutes per team. They have a load of concepts and things behind there. I wanted to take that a little bit, and I started off in the preseason doing around the kind of clock effectively. So we did the North, South, East, and West, AFC versus NFC. We did a bit of on a fancy twist, and we took a look at each of the divisions one by one, and took a look at what was the best kind of fantasy team that you could make out of those. And I want to do something a bit more similar, but maybe look at it in a quicker manner. So what I'm going to do is giving myself 90 seconds per team, and we're going to be looking through, and maybe at the end of each conference we'll have a look, and or at the end of each division we'll have a look and say, how does their real life success or projected success, because we probably know the NFC West and the NFC South gonna be pretty much the worst teams out there, or the worst divisions out there, comparing to the NFC East and the AFC West, who are going to be very competitive. In all, maybe the AFC North is going to be the best. We don't know, but how does that pan out for fantasy? So what you'll see is every 90 seconds, this clock will go down. In the audio, I'll probably put a klaxon in there just so you can follow along if you're listening on Spotify. But without further ado, let's start with the team of the moment, the Jets and the AFC East. So the Jets, what we're going to do is we're going to pick two players who I think are interesting on each team. We're going to give a bit of time to the first one and then try and catch the next one. But I think the person who's most interesting is not going to be the man of the moment, Aaron Rodgers, but Garrett Wilson and how he's going to fare. Second-year wide receivers often do break out, but Garrett Wilson showed that he is an elite route runner. He is elite speed, and if you've watched any of the Hard Knocks episodes with him highlighted, he is so smooth and so fast. He is going to be a number one, and I don't think it's a downgrade for Aaron Rodgers. He's had a year without Devontae Adams. He showed he couldn't do that. I think he's got an elite set of wide receivers, and even the backup guys that are doing really well. There is a lot of questions, though, around the running back position for fantasy anyway. So you've got a lock with Wilson. I think he's fantastic. But the running back position, is it going to be Breece Hall? Is it going to be Dalvin Cook? It's a big decision. As of yet, I think probably Dalvin Cook will be the starter coming into the season. I think you need to follow the money. But Breece Hall will be the change-up back. And I think what you'll probably see further down the line is that Breece Hall will gather a bit of momentum. He's come off a worse injury than Dalvin Cook has, and we'll see him make his way into our fantasy hearts just in time for the playoffs, hopefully. The Jets have a rubbish first 5 games, so I would avoid starting them if you can. Obviously, you're going to be starting Wilson, but Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook, I would fade. And now it's on to the next team. So let's start and go to the Bills. The Bills, who a lot of people are picking to win this division. And I think there are two interesting players. And I'm going to start off with probably the obvious one, and it's going to be Josh Allen. Josh Allen is, in many people's eyes, going to be the QB1 this year. I personally think that Jalen Hurts has a better chance of becoming the QB1 this year again. I just think the running upside and the weak NFC the NFC division in general is going to lend itself to Jalen Hurts doing a bit more, but maybe they'll lean on the running game. In fact, but no, we're here to talk about Allen. Is Allen the only running back they've got? Is a big question, and yes, he can throw, but he has thrown the most interceptions in the last 2 years in the entire league, with 26 over the last 2 years. But Allen is a fantastic quarterback, and you shouldn't. And he's got great weapons around him: Diggs, Gabe Davis. Is it Khalil Shakir? Is it his number 3? But either way, he's got some great weapons, and one of those weapons is James Cook, and he's going to be the second guy I want to talk about. I think James Cook could be a bit of a sleeper. Yes, he's got that second year boost. He knows the team a bit more. They have brought in some competition with Damian Harris, but I think Damian Harris will be more of a red zone back. I think we'll see James Cook between the 20s and in third down passing plays, and I think he will become a bit of a safety blanket for Allen. For a Bills team who don't have a fantastic O-line, especially in that NFC East where there's a lot of pass rush. Right, on to the Pats. This is going a lot quicker than I thought. The Pats are a weird team. I think they're probably going to be one of, if not the worst team in football. Mainly based on their competition. It's going to be really difficult for them to compete in the AFC East. You have got a couple of weapons, and let's start with Juju. Juju Smith-Schuster coming in as number 1. He's never really had that role, and I think people have often wondered, can he be that guy? He was a guy in when he was with the Steelers, but that was behind Antonio Brown. Sorry. He did fantastically in that second role, in that slot role, and that's where he plies his trade. But what he needs is a true alpha ahead of him to make him relevant for PPR systems. He will be relevant-ish, but I think he's going to be a wide receiver 3. I don't think we're going to get the volume. It's become obvious that Elliott is the go-to in the red zone, and I think that's going to have a real impact on other players, including Ramondre Stevenson. Ramondre Stevenson was drafted so high, and if you've passed draft season now, this is coming out on the Friday, so you've passed draft season. You've drafted him in the 3rd, if not very early 4th. I think you've overpaid if you've drafted him. I think Zeke will probably be a better fantasy asset in the early weeks and potentially whole season than Ramondre Stevenson based on value alone. I just can't see him. Yeah, he was a monster last year, and I think that was maybe an outlier because you don't generally see Pats players under Belichick going year after year being fantastic. Yeah, we have 1 year of James White, but where was he the next? Right, let's look at the Dolphins. The Dolphins, I think, are going to be really fantasy relevant. I think they're going to be a good team. I think a lot of people are writing them off because Tua is potentially unstable. I mean, he's learned to fall this season, but the two guys I want to talk about are synonymous with a fast passing attack, and that is Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I don't think you can talk about them in isolation. You have to talk to them as a pair because you've got to guard both of them. If you guard one, the other one will kill you. I think that means we're going to see people line up in zone because they cannot man up on these guys, which means they are going to get targets. Yes, they're maybe going to be underneath, but I think PPR is going to be crazy for them. And you can't guard them like that all game. They are going to break off a humongous play at some point. Each one of them is probably going to have a 200+ yard game at some point in the season and go absolutely off. Tyreek Hill is going after that 2,000 yard season. I think it's probably going to sit probably more around the 1,400 if Waddle is still a viable wide receiver 1. What's a wide receiver 2? Sorry. I know a lot of people have picked him up as a wide receiver 1. They picked him up ahead of some other guys in drafts. He's going early to mid in the second round behind Tyreek Hill, who's going early to mid in the first round. It's going to be a formidable attack. And if Tua can stay healthy, these guys will be fantasy gold no matter what, because I think their defense, at least for the first few weeks without Jalen Ramsey, is going to be a bit suspect. We'll have to see how that plays out. Right, that's the AFC East. Let's move on to the NFC East because we did it around the compass last time when we were going through this in preseason. And you know what? Let's start off with two really good divisions. I think the AFC and NFC East are fantastic divisions in real life football. So let's see if they are in fantasy football when we're talking about it in this way. Let's start with the Eagles. Fresh off that disappointment in the Super Bowl, they're going to come back and be good. Now, I had a couple of people that I wanted to talk about, but I now don't want to talk about them. I'm going to talk about someone else. We're going to talk about Jalen Hurts. I've already mentioned him when I talked about Josh Allen, I think Jalen Hurts could be the QB1 in most formats when it's a standard format where you get because he is the main running back, and I think that's maybe what hurts other players on his team. And I'm going to talk. I talked about this on Thursday's episode about why I was not hot on any of the newly minted running backs for Philadelphia. Yeah, they've had a good history of fancy running backs in the last few years. Even Sanders did well despite him hating fantasy football. But Rashard Penny, DeAndre Swift, Boston Scott, and Kenny Gainwell just don't like their outputs. So because it's going to be Jalen Hurts running the ball on those short yardage, he's going to be in the red zone. Yeah, they're going to get a little bit of work between the 20s, but it's not going to be a fun time for them. Jalen Hurts is going to rule, and he's going to evenly distribute it between AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, who are three elite receiving options. You have a plethora of options in your fantasy Eagles teams and your choices there. But I wouldn't say, unless someone absolutely breaks out, and Penny is on the bubble there as well, I wouldn't say it's any of the RBs. Right, Washington. Are Washington going to be good? I don't know. There's a lot of talk about Howell this season, but I don't think we've seen enough of him for me to be able to say whether he's going to be fantasy relevant or not. I think he's probably going to be raw at best. But I want to talk about two players who I think could be fantasy relevant, and it's not going to be Scary Terry and Jahan Dotson. I'm instead going to be talking about the running back pair. I'm not sure which one I like most. Brian Robinson is going to be the lead back. I think he hasn't got two holes in his legs, which really helps this year. It's always good when your lead running back hasn't been shot. But Antonio Gibson, secretly, I think is going to be good. Howell, he's shown a propensity to heave it down, which speaks well for Terry McLaurin. But I think in a wider sample set, he's going to need some outlets. And without a decent tight end on the roster, I think Logan Thomas is still there, but he's not particularly relevant. I think Gibson is going to get a lot more play. And on those bubbles, on those screens, those short yardage routes, that's where he can really play. Take a Texas route, take a wheel route. I think Gibson can take it to the house. He has got electric speed. He was a wide receiver once back in the day, so he's got safe hands. Brian Robinson isn't used for that. Brian Robinson is a bruiser, which I also love. So I love both of these in equal measures. And they are both being drafted in the 9th or 10th round. I see value above and beyond that for both of them. In my dynasty team, I'm carrying both of them because I'm not sure which one's going to break out. But I would say in close games, I think we could see a lot more Gibson than Brian Robinson. Right, obvious pick, the Cowboys, America's team. A lot of your teams, I understand from the demographic that are listening today. I could talk about Pollard. I've talked about him enough. I want to talk about the CD and Dak connection instead. CD Lamb is a wide receiver one. He's improved year on year. I think he is going to be fantastic once again. And yeah, I think you're safe if you drafted him in the first round. He's not maybe as sexy a name as Devontae Adams in the first round, or Stephon Diggs or Tyreek Hill, but he is safe, and I think he is most definitely the number one. They brought in Cooks, but I don't think that solves the wide receiver mystery because they've also lost a really good tight end in Dalton Schultz. Can Jake Ferguson step up in year 2, I think? Or there's a couple of others that have been drafted as well. Will Pollard be the guy? I don't think he's seen the workload there. But I think the problem could be Dak. Now, it's not going to be a problem for CD, and you think, well, CD's an elite wide receiver. He's going to have an elite quarterback throwing to him, surely. I don't see it in Dak. And I think the signing of Trey Lance actually, although he's not going to be a starter, I think it's just to put pressure on Dak because he was not good last year. Yeah, fancy he was okay, but so many interceptions. You couldn't rely on him week on week. And I think it's going to be the same again. I don't think that's going to spoil CD Lamb's place because these guys have got a great defense. They're going to stay in games. Yeah, I would pick CD over Dak. He's the elite. Dak is the one that maybe is drawing him back a little bit. And finally, let's move on to the G-Men. The Giants. MetLife Stadium is going to be cracking, and you know what? It was great to see the Giants go against the Jets in that preseason game and see some players actually play. There's only 2 players to talk about on this lineup, and they are going to be Darren Waller, the new toy, and Saquon Barkley, who got his extension for a year, avoid the franchise tag, but could we get franchise up? It was a weird situation. But either way, those are going to be your two fancy assets that you are going to want to be playing week in, week out. And I think they're going to be fantastic. Especially with the Kelsey news, I think Waller is a tight end one locked in. They're going to want to use him. They're going to want to play with him and what have you. Daniel Jones, I don't think has the efficiency to throw it deep as much. So Saquon Barkley is going to get a lot of handoffs. He's going to get a lot of bubbles and screenplays. I think Waller's going to be involved in the slot quite a lot. He might even be lined up outside. Can he be the guy he was a couple of years ago? I hope he can be. Can Saquon be? I think he is. I think Saquon showed such a comeback player. It's a comeback season last year. He was absolutely fantastic. I wished I drafted him more this year. I had got a little bit of Waller. Funnily enough, I traded Waller away for Kelsey, but that was a long play. I think Waller and Saquon are going to be absolutely brilliant but for a Giants team who I don't think are going to come out on top. I think they could be last in the division. Wow. So those East teams are good. The Jets, Bills, Pats, Finns, Eagles, Commanders currently, could change, Cowboys and Giants, all fantastic teams. And I think they're both going to be really tough divisions. If I had to pick one from each, I'd probably pick the Jets to come out on top on the AFC East. I think it's, after a tough start, they're going to roll everyone. And I think they could surprise the Bills in week one. In the NFC, it's going to be the Eagles. I think it's probably going to be Eagles, Washington, Cowboys, Giants. That's how I would look at it in real life. But just because I think Washington's defense is plucky and the Cowboys won't live up to expectation. I think, though, we do have three potential playoff teams in each division. So I'll have to see how that fares. Right, we'll take a very quick break and then we'll move on to the North. And we are back. Let's take a look at the North, shall we? And we're going to be starting. Clock's already started. Let me reset that timer. That's a bit cheeky. Let's start with the Ravens. And I think there's only two players on this team to talk about. We just could only focus on two players in the last one. But there's too many mouths to feed. And I don't think enough ball to go around in the Ravens land. Lamar is going to be your guy. Weirdly, Lamar dropped into the fourth, fifth behind even Justin Fields in a lot of. I think maybe Justin Fields has that hotness about him. Lamar Jackson, maybe injury concerns coming off the last season. There's a lot of questions there, but I think Lamar Jackson is going to be fantastic. And there's a lot of signs that he's going to be throwing more. I think he will still be a running threat, which is what you want him for. You want him for that running upside, and you want him for that high octane offense upside, which he had in his MVP season. And the guy he's going to be throwing to is, of course, going to be Mark Andrews. Currently, Mark Andrews is on track to be the tight end too. I think Travis Kelce being out is just for a couple of weeks potentially is going to open the door for Mark Andrews to just be that guy. I think people are already trading Kelce away for Mark Andrews, which I don't think is a wise decision long term. But Mark Andrews is going to be fantastic, and in a narrow tree of well, it's a very wide tree, but I don't think they're going to be funneled hugely to OBJ, despite him being paid. Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. I think the Rashad Bateman train has left the station. I think Andrews is going to be the wide receiver one as a tight end on that team. Looking over to the Browns now. Now, I could talk a lot about Deshaun Watson. I'm still pending whether I might get a share of him. I'm not sure if I like that, but that was more of a dynasty block play. We'll have to see how that goes. But I'm not going to talk about him. I'm going to talk about a guy who I picked up a lot of. I got 5 shares of this guy, Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is primed to be RB1. He has no competition in the backfield, aside from a couple of rookies and some journeymen. Kareem Hunt has gone, who is maybe vulturing some third down targets. Chubb can catch it. There's one play I remember he got a 50-yard reception a few years ago, and I thought, why don't they do that more often? Because he got open. He is fast. Yes, he's a bruiser. He's between the tackles, but he is also fast, and he will have so many red zone touches. Because I'm not sure about the receiving core outside of Amari Cooper, who is my second player that I wanted to highlight, who I think is going to be good. I don't think it's going to be great. I think Deshaun Watson is going to start off a bit cagey potentially, and they're going to stick to the run. They're going to play inside a little bit more. I think they'll let Deshaun Watson play a bit more down the season, because I still think he's got a bit of rust on him. But I think Amari Cooper is going to suffer for that. But Amari Cooper was still good with a poor quarterback under Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett wasn't poor, but he wasn't, what he wasn't what Deshaun Watson was built to be when they picked him up. They've got a lot of riding on these two offensive players, and in contract years, I think Amari Cooper's in a contract year. I think he needs to ball out, but we'll see if that actually happens. The Bengals, so many to pick from. But I've talked about Mixon quite a lot in the preseason. Burrow is an obvious choice, although shaky with that knee. But let's talk about the 1-2 in Chase and Higgins. Surely one of these guys has really got to dominate, and I think it's going to be Chase. It has to be. I think Chase has the raw route running, speed, and general hands to be a fantastic number one. And if you picked him up at the 102 or the 103, even at the 101, I don't think that's bad in a PPR league. I don't think he'll maybe get as many receptions as Higgins, though. Higgins, I think, is more of a PPR play because he's that big guy. I'm surprised he wasn't shipped elsewhere for picks. I think they want to keep the team together to go after it again. I think it's still very much their Super Bowl window, or as Burrow says, it's always going to be their Super Bowl window as long as he is starting. I think Higgins will be interesting, and he'll probably get more receptions, but he's not going to get those long bombs. I think he's going to, see a sub 1,000 yard season, whereas Chase is probably going to see a 1,400 yard season. You're maybe going to get more receptions and more targets for Higgins as as their offensive line isn't going to be fantastic. Yes, it is improved, but I think you're going to need to not hand off to, but check down to a bigger target while Chase is trying to stretch the field. I think as a tandem, they're fantastic. I can't pick out which one's the better, but for my money, it's probably Chase off the back of that conversation. Conversation with myself. Steelers. Let's finish the NFC North weekly. I like the Steelers. Kenny Pickett has become a darling of the preseason. Sorry, he's good, but then he's not a player I want to talk about because he's boring. He is milquetoast. He's a second year, maybe third year quarterback. I can't remember what he was. He's going to have an okay season. I think is going to be the case. But I think someone who could have a breakout season is going to be Najee Harris. Everyone's talking about Jaylen Warren and how dynamic he looked in preseason, but Najee Harris is first-round running back material. He is a bruiser. He is how they want to play. They want to beat people up on the offensive line. They've got an improved offensive line, and he is not efficient, but he is a volume play, which I think Tomlin has liked over the years. He prefers to go with the featured back. I think Najee Harris has more options available to him. He's well off that Liz Frank injury or that thing in his foot, the plate in his foot he's talked about. Najee Harris is going to be good. And I think he's going to be good because Deontay Johnson is going to be good. Deontay Johnson didn't catch a touchdown pass and annoyed every fantasy owner who had him last year. But he is a reception machine. He is going to be Kenny Pickett's best friend. I think Pickens could be useful as well. Pickens is more that big body guy, but receptions is what you want in a volume play like this. I think it's going to be a bit more dinky-dunky. Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson for the win in the AFC North. Now, what's happening in the NFC North? The Packers look weird. Jordan Love, though, I think is a really interesting prospect. He was really highly drafted. I think he was they traded up to draft him in the first. Was it 3-4 years ago? I put him in my new beginnings because he's finally out of Aaron Rodgers' shadow, and this is effectively a new team for him. And he is leading the charge of a bunch of young guys, and a bunch of young guys who I think could be relatively handy. Yeah, I like Christian Watson. I like Romeo Dobbs. I think they're good. But the guys I think who are really going to show through are going to be Love, who is I think needs to stamp his authority on this team and make it not be Aaron Rodgers' offense again. That's not how he plays. I think he's going to be led more by the offensive coordinator, and I think he's going to be led more by his running backs, which you've got obviously Aaron Jones, but I'm more interested in A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon has not had a breakout season. He's always been behind Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones took a pay cut to stay on, which makes me think maybe he was due for an exit, and maybe they're looking to clear the books a little bit. But AJ Dillon is primed for a breakout. He is big, He is fast. He's shown last year that he can catch the ball. Maybe not quite as well as Aaron Jones, but I think he could end up switching roles from being the third down or second down bruiser back, maybe red zone guy, to being the guy instead of Aaron Jones later down the line. The Bears. The Bears are really good. I think they're going to be really interesting. They're not going to be good. They're still going to be a bad team, I think, but they're going to be good for fantasy. And that comes in the form of two players, really, that Fields DJ Moore connection. But let's focus on Fields. Fields has so many more things around him. He actually has some O-line players, great. He has a wide receiver one in DJ Moore, fantastic. He has Cole Kmet, who they paid $50 million. $50 million, that's silly money. That is long-term commitment money, which means they like him. And he doesn't do a huge amount of pass blocking, so he's going to be in the pass catching mix. I think DJ Moore and Cole Kmet are going to be fantastic weapons for him. So your fancy kind of projections for this, I think Fields is going to be a QB1 because he's also a running back. I think we're going to see him break the single season record for running as a quarterback. He showed that he can do that in a single game. So why not for a whole season when they actually let him loose? And I think Matt Eberflus would be stupid not to rely on two expensive weapons that he's got in DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet is a sneaky pick for a top 5 tight end. I'm really upset I didn't get much of him. I don't think I got any of him actually after hyping up so much. But I am going to be looking at him because I think he's going to have those games. He's that kind of player who you kind of he's on your bubble. If you've maybe picked him up as a second tight end because of where he got drafted, if you see him on the waiver wire, pick him up. That's my advice because Fields is going to throw to him. The Vikings. What can I say about the Vikings? They've got a terrible defense, which probably speaks to a really good offense. Hockenson just got paid like $74 million over 3 years or something silly like that. He's wide receiver money. They have a young team. Jay Jettis, Justin Jefferson is going to be fantastic. And let's just give him a second. He was the 101 for a good reason this year. I think he's going to be Offensive Player of the Year and probably fantasy MVP for a lot of you. And I think that's because of the circumstances. They're going to have to throw it a lot because their defense is terrible. It's really, really bad. Kirk Cousins is going to be under center a lot. He's going to have to throw it. And I don't think he's got the weapons he maybe needs in the backfield. He's going to be looking for wide receivers. Because I think Mattison, and he's the player I want to, especially want to talk about because everyone hyped up Mattison. Oh yeah, of course he's a slot in RB1. I don't think he is. He has not got the skill set or the longevity that Dalvin Cook has. Dalvin Cook has had 4 back-to-back Pro Bowl seasons in his locker. He had a down year last year and was let go. He was let go because they're looking to rebuild, and I don't think they're seeing Mattison as the long-term solution. I think they paid Mattison a little bit, but they didn't pay him running back one money. Not that anyone pays running back one money anymore. Mattison, I'm not liking for fantasy. I don't think he's going to be particularly efficient. And they're going to be looking for Justin Jefferson, Addison, and potentially KJ Osborne as well. Sorry, I went a little bit over time there. Hockenson obviously going to be in the mix. It's going to be an intro. You want a piece of the offense, but which piece? I would avoid Mattison if I were you. Finally, let's look at the Lions. I have hyped up Jahmyr Gibbs all offseason, all preseason, and they're going to use him differently. Not what you expect. How was that? I don't know, but it sounds like in game 1, he might be a vertical threat because he is fast, he is agile, he is a good route runner. I think he's everything that team need him to be. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be the volume guy. He's going to be there. He will be on every down. He will be their primary receiver in the slot. He'll occasionally go out wide, but that's not his game. Go out wide. His game is receptions in the slot, finding mismatches and beating up players who are bigger than him in coverage. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a smooth guy. He's going to be the guy who's going to get way more. He's going to be not going to be targeted, I don't think, a huge amount in the red zone. I don't think we'll see a huge amount of touchdowns from him. He's not going to be running through the tackles because that's going to be David Montgomery, but you are going to get enough volume out of him between 20s. And with Jared Goff and a good offensive line, he's going to have time to throw. And when Jared Goff has time to throw, he can pick out people precisely. If Gibbs is used in the wide receiver game, he's going to be the next Kamara. Or the next Kamara when he was good. Amon-Ra St. Brown will be fantastic. I think this is a piece of, you want a piece of this team. They're all going to be good. So if you can pick up Gibbs, brilliant. I don't think he'd be available because he was drafted so highly. Amon-Ra St. Brown, first rounder, but if you can get Goff, that's a nice little bonus. Wow, that was the North. It's hard doing this, It's hard thinking about these things on the fly with only a couple of notes. But the North, I can probably see the Bengals coming out top. I think it's going to be a tough division, and again, you could see. You're not going to see three, but you're definitely going to see two playoff teams out of this. And if I was to go for it, I'd probably go Bengals and Browns. I only say Browns because of their defense. I think they're going to be fantastic, and they're just going to win enough games dirty. I just don't think the Ravens have got it in their locker. But instead of the East, this is probably the second. The AFC East. This is going to be the second most competitive division in the conference. The NFC North, any of these teams could win because there are so many unknowns. I think the lead in most people's minds is the Lions, but the Packers could surprise. I don't think they'll go much further than a playoff berth if they do get far. I don't think the Vikings will do things unless they become that 13-4 team that were a complete misnomer last year. And the Bears could take that step if Justin Fields takes that step. But I think, for my money, the Lions is where I like it in real life, and I like their lineup in fantasy the most as well. Right, we'll take a very short break once again, and we will come back with the AFC and NFC West. And we are back already. Let's go at the West, shall we? And let's reset that timer and start with the AFC West and the defending champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, they are good. They're really good. And obviously, Mahomes is going to be fantastic. But I want to talk about two players who, one, who's going to be great, but has a bit of a cloud over at the moment, and one could be. Travis Kelce is going to be great. When he's available, he's going to be the wide receiver one for that team as a tight end, just as Mark Andrews is for the Ravens. He is going to be for the Chiefs. I think, enough said. You've drafted him in the first round, probably in the top 6 picks. You maybe got him at the back end if you were lucky, but he is fantastic. And I think this year, with the rise of tight end premium, where you get more points for a tight end picking it up, the fact he's in that position is fantastic. He doesn't pass block. He is fantastic when he's on and doesn't have a bruise on his bone, not ACL. Thank goodness for that. He will be fantastic, and that's why I've drafted for him, and I bought the dip when I've traded for him as well. A player who I think is worth a mention, though, because I don't want to look at that running back run because it's a bit scary, is going to be Sky Moore. Sky Moore is my pick of the various wide receivers, Rashee Rice, Tony, and others, and Justin Ross, to break out. He is a highly drafted guy coming second year breakout. I think he's got a talent, and I think he showed out in preseason that he is going to ball out this year. The Broncos. Can they be any worse than last year? No, they cannot be any worse than last year. And I think we're going to see regression back to normal Russ. Well, maybe not quite normal Russ, because he was amazing over at the Seahawks. But I think he's going to be serviceable this year, and he's basically going undrafted. He's going to be a waiver wire pickup that I am going to be looking at if the matchup works. He's got Sean Payton. Sean Payton is known for being great with quarterbacks who are maybe undersized. Obviously, Drew Brees was a bit undersized, so there's that. He's going to be a fantastic player, a fantastic boost for Russ on that team. But I think another fantastic boost for Russ is going to be Javonte Williams coming back. Javonte Williams is great, no doubt about it. I just don't think he's had enough behind him really to show that he's great to everyone. He was drafted in the 8th, 9th round in a lot of leagues this year. I think he's going to come back and have effectively a comeback player of the year kind of season, but he's just not. He's not coming back from much apart from a bit of a banged up knee last year. I think he is going to show the electric play that they drafted him for, and that he now has a running back field to himself. See, Smarty P. Ryan is not competition in that regard. Moving on, we've got the Raiders. Raiders are an odd team. I'm not really sure what's happening over there, but they had so many problems in getting Josh Jacobs back into the team, who is their number one running back, who is the number one fantasy running back in non PPR systems last year. You just question what they're actually trying to achieve over there. You've also got Chris Jones and loads more drama, which I need to read up on, actually happening over there. Maybe Josh McDaniels just isn't it. I think that might be the biggest question mark, whether this system, or whether the Patriot way that they've tried to adopt is actually going to work for them, because I don't think it feels very Raidersy. Yeah, it's an interesting one, but I hope Josh Jacobs will have another fantastic season. Yes, Zamir White showed some promise in preseason in relief when Josh Jacobs wasn't available. Josh Jacobs wouldn't have played in the preseason anyway, but yeah, I think he's going to be dominating that backfield as he should. The question mark is going to be around Devontae Adams, though. And Devontae Adams is trying to think how to phrase it. Is Devontae Adams really going to thrive with Jimmy G throwing him short balls? Probably not. But I think he's still going to be fantastic, and he will adapt his game. He has adapted his game to a dink and dunk offense with Aaron Rodgers in the past, and I think he'll do the same for Jimmy G. So yeah, I would be playing Adams week in, week out. You have to play him based on the draft capital. Likewise, Josh Jacobs. I think they're both going to be fantastic this year. And finally, let's take a look at the Chargers. I like the Chargers a lot, and I'll give myself an extra 5 seconds to talk about it there. But yeah, the Chargers, I think, are going to be really, really good this season. On offense, I don't think their defense is going to be much to talk about, because I don't think it's improved that much. Derwin James is going to be a great safety. I think they are better than they were last year, not by a significant margin. But the guys I want to talk about is, yeah, I'm going to pick on Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, I think, is going to be a PPR machine this year. He is the number one guy. He is, I think, is a contract year. He's maybe playing towards the end of his career. Maybe he'll do a sign extension to retire that. I don't know. I can't remember how old he is, but I think he's probably around 29, 30. He dominates, and he is the biggest slot guy you'll ever want. And for fantasy purposes, I think he will get back to the greatness that we once saw, and the reason why we drafted him in the second and third round in years gone by. And the guy who I think is really going to get back to where we expect him to be under Kellen Moore is Justin Herbert. I have so much faith in Justin Herbert. I managed to nick him in a couple of places. I think he's going to be great, and I think based on circumstances and game type, we're going to see the Chargers that we need to throw it a lot. You'll notice I haven't talked about Austin Eckler. I think Austin Eckler is a given that he's going to be good, but I think they're going to go throw it deeper, and that's where I think we might see Allen potentially stretching the field or be available as Quentin Johnston / Josh Palmer and Mike Williams really stretch the field. I love this offense. Get some of it. Ooh. Right, on from a good division to probably the worst. And we'll start off with my beloved Rams. Aaron, better. He does deserve better. He really does. Cam Akers, I don't think he's a good running back. The reason they drafted him in the third a couple of years ago when they had Darrell Henderson was Darrell Henderson wasn't showing out, and Cam Akers ran in Florida behind a really poor offensive line. They've got a really poor offensive line, but he hasn't really shown the consistency that you expect at the NFL level. I think the fact that they've retained people like Zach Evans and is it not Kyron Williams? I can't remember their guys. The guys that the Jags that they have on the rest of that lineup means I don't think they have full faith in Cam Akers to be the guy. The other guy who should be the guy, but I'm really worried he won't play at all this season now, is Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, who drafted in the first, I avoided him because I thought it was a bad team. I didn't want to have to be disappointed by a player who I love so much. Not playing week one officially now, and could potentially get put on IR. That could mean 4, that could mean 6, that could mean 8 games. He's out. If you drafted him, your season isn't over, but it's going to be a bit of an uphill struggle. When he comes back, has he got the potential to be a Triple Crown winner? Yes, of course he has. And in an offense that's going to have to throw it a huge amount, Cooper Kupp is where you want it. But I would be looking at his backups and Tyler Higbee if I were you. Let's talk about another terrible team. And I like talking about this terrible team because I hate them. The Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals are going to be bad. Josh Dobbs is a potential starter, I think. Clayton Tune is the backup. Kyler Murray on IR. If you picked up Kyler Murray, that's great. I think it's on the pup or not the IR potentially. But yeah, he will come back and be good. He's a keeper. He's a stash if you want him. You probably got him late, or yeah, he was free to pick up in drafts. But who's he going to be throwing to? And I'm really worried about Hollywood Brown. I think Hollywood Brown could be shipped out because he has too much talent to just stay there. I don't think he has enough. You know, he won't want to stay there if he's not playing with Kyler Murray. And if they are going for the tank and they're going for Caleb Williams and looking to ship off Kyler Murray next year, which I think all signs are pointed to, Jonathan Gannon looks terrible. Yeah, he's not a player that I want to have on my lineup, but I think he's the best of a bad bunch currently. The only guy who I think is going to have any level of consistency is going to be James Conner. And that's just because they're going to have to use him because they haven't got anyone else. And when you have guys who don't thrive in a system, who quarterbacks who aren't going to be fantastic, you're going to rely on the running back. And James Conner is a veteran who is playing out probably a veteran style contract. He's going to make his money there and then move on. But they're going to play him a lot. I think he will be on every down because he's fantastic, as he was at the Steelers back in the day. He's going to be consistent but inefficient. One of the teams I really do like in the NFC West, though, is the Seahawks. Again, it kills me to say it because I'm a Rams fan. Boz, if you're listening, I think your team is going to win this division. I think over the 49ers. Yeah, it's crazy that. Everyone has been down on DK Metcalf. I don't see why. He is big. He is strong. Red zone threat. Got great hands. Fast. Route running has improved immensely. When everyone thought when he was drafted he was just a go guy. Yeah, he is amazing, and I really want a piece of him wherever I can get him. I tried to get him in the third round. I got sniped a few times. But the guy who I don't want in this offense, who I think is more important to talk about, is Ken Walker. Kenneth Walker was drafted really highly, probably in the fourth, fifth for most of you. I think the signing of Zach Charbonnet really speaks volumes. Zach Charbonnet is bigger. He is a better pass catcher. Maybe not as fast, but and Ken Walker, I think, if now fills the now removed Rashard Penny role, and what we're going to see is Zach Charbonnet take on the Chris Carson role, and I think that dynamic has been recreated. I think Pete Carroll has been looking for that dynamic as well. But you can rely on these guys, and I think both of them will be serviceable, as Chris Carson and Rashard Penny were once upon a time. But I think it's going to be a better version of that duo because they're both much more highly drafted, and I think there's a bit more backing. And as a team, they're just looking good. And finally, we will get on to my not so beloved 49ers. I know a few of you are 49ers fans out there. They're a good team. They are probably the best defense out there, but we don't want to talk about defense. This is fantasy football. Kickers and defense shouldn't be a thing. No, I lied. They should be, but they're just not my thing. CMC is obvious. Yeah, leave it at that. But the guy in the offense who I really like, and I think is going to be really interesting, is going to be Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk and Debo, I think, came into the league at the same time. Potentially, Debo was given the big contract. Everyone loved him. Everyone drafted Debo above. Everyone. Sorry, no, it's the other way around. Actually, I think Ayuk was drafted higher, and in his first season was touted as being better. Debo had that crazy season. Everyone got on the Debo wagon and forgot about Ayuk. Ayuk had a great, sneaky great season last year, and I think he will continue to have a sneaky great season this year. The other guy who I want to talk about in this offense is going to be Kittle. You've got Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy loves Kittle. Kittle loves Brock Purdy. I think that is going to be a lovely connection. And I think Kittle is actually, I really wish I got some of him in my drafts this year. But I think Kittle is going to have one of those seasons that is going to be solidifying himself as the number one target, similar to how Andrews and Kelsey have done in the past. We've talked about Kittle in that space of those guys, but he's, it's because he's had spike weeks and he's possibly one of the purest football players out there. But I think this time he's found his match in Brock Purdy. Never thought I'd say that, But the NFC and AFC West. AFC West is great. They've got the Chiefs. That's all you need. And the Chargers, I think, are going to be plucky. Could the Chargers charger and disappoint everyone? Yes, of course they can. Their colleagues in the SoFi Stadium, the Rams, I think are going to be less impressive. I think they have a chance to be, two of these teams, the Rams and the Cardinals, have the chance to be the worst team in football this year. Yeah, I do not see things happening. I think the Sean McVay factor will probably mean the Rams won't tank too hard, and I do believe that the strength around people like Puka Nakua, Van Jefferson, Tyler Higbee, there's some good players there. The 49ers are probably going to win the division, but I want to see the Seahawks win the division, and I think if you can get a 49ers or a Seahawks player, you're going to be very happy. Right, we'll take our last quick break and move on to the South, where we've got very contrasting fortunes across the AFC and NFC. Right, so let's take a look at our final two divisions, the AFC and NFC South. These are two divisions that I thought were going to be the worst in football going in the preseason. But you know what? I think they might be a bit spicy, a bit interesting. At the very least, one from each of them has to reach the playoffs. Let's see who it's going to be. And are they going to be fancy interesting until then? Who knows? But let's start with the Texans, who were the second worst team last year. Lovie Smith ruined their chances of getting the number one pick. CJ Stroud is now with them. I don't want to talk about him, though, because he's a rookie QB, and I'm not excited about rookie QBs this year. I want to talk about Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce, as a rookie running back, was fantastic. Played way out of his skin. Volume play for fantasy was fantastic. He even, put off some big runs. He was available in the passing game as well. And I think with a rookie QB, you're going to rely on a running back. He is part of the system. Yes, they've got D'Amico Ryans in, who, in that 49ers tree, are they going to play more running back by committee? Potentially. I think they've got a Singletary. I need to remember my my free agents there, but Singletary, I don't think it stands a chance as the RB1 role. I think he's going to be the prime, and that's going to be the variation on that 49ers tree that we have over there. The guy I'm interested in the wide receiver group, though, there's a lot. You've got Nico Collins there. I think you've got the ghost of Robert Woods. But I think John Mechie, who hasn't had a full season, obviously his rookie season was hampered by a horrible disease in cancer. But I'm really interested to see John Mechie, who was drafted and touted very highly coming out of college, whether he can do the thing. I think he's a bit of a sleeper here and someone that you could maybe pick up off waivers if he has a good couple of games, because they're going to need to throw it. They're going to need to throw it. The Jags. My pick for the division. They were so close to greatness last year. They went from worst to first very handily. And Trevor Lawrence is good. I've said Trevor Lawrence is really, really good. He's got more weapons around him, and I won't talk a huge amount about Calvin Ridley because I think he's such an unknown yet. But you've got Christian Kirk there. You've got guys that you played well with last year, and Trevor Lawrence played well with massively. I think he's going to be boosted in the running game as well, because you don't just have to rely on the strength of Travis Etienne. You've got Tank Bigsby there. All of this points to Trevor Lawrence going up another level. I don't think he'll be a top guy, but he's going to be on that fringe, and he's going to be a player that you're going to have difficulty not starting week by week. And in a league where tight ends are at a premium, Evan Ingram getting paid after being franchise tagged, I think is really indicative. And he was such an outlet, and he showed the promise that, despite getting a Pro Bowl nod a couple of years ago for catching like 15 passes or something stupid like that, when it was just Giants fans voting for him basically. Evan Ingram, I think, is actually a good player. There is a wasp in this room here. It just flew by my face for anyone watching on YouTube. But Evan Ingram, really fantastic. I think he's going to have a really great year once again. This timer is really, really destructive, isn't it? It really worries me every time I look up at it. I'm going to go on a bit more, but Evan Ingram, as a tight end where you have the top 5 guys, he sits firmly above the rest of the guys that you have out there. I think he is probably above Cole Kmet, above Dalton Schultz, in my estimation, above Pat Frymouth, who you just draft because he's there. Evan Ingram, I think, has a possibility to have a mini breakout over there. Let's move on to the Colts. All change at the Colts. Anthony Richardson coming in, who I think will have to be their running back one. They haven't got anyone else, have they? I know they looked at Kareem Hunt, but they've got Evan Hull and Deion Jackson, who I think Evan Hull could be interesting. Deion Jackson didn't really show up outside of 1 or 2 games, and that was because they thought Taylor's gone. They're not going to look at this guy, but I think they know what he is. Yes, I think there was a hype video said he has that dog in him. I don't believe he does. I think Evan Hull, sorry, is going to be the backup, while Taylor is out on pup. And I think Taylor is an interesting one because I don't think you'll see Taylor play for the Colts this season. I think he will get traded. He obviously has to miss 4 games because he's on pup. I think that was a sneaky play by Jim Irsay, and I don't think it's a good play. But yeah, we'll see how that one plays out. But the guy I really am interested in is Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman as a big target. He is a franchise kind of guy, and I think he's going to be a big outlet for them. Yeah, they have a rotating cast at tight end. I think Pittman is going to be the wide receiver 1 out there. I think he's going to serve Anthony Richardson well in a rookie season where he's going to need to look for him a lot. He's not going to be making multiple reads. He's going to be looking for his first read. I think he's going to be the first read in a lot of cases, and Michael Pittman has enough talent to get separated as well. Finally, in the AFC South, let's look at the Titans. The Titans are a team run by Derrick Henry, and run is the operative word there. He is going to have a monstrous season because they are going to run him into the ground, as this could be his final or penultimate season, because he's just going to get hurt. And I feel really bad for Henry because he is such a good player, but he is just been used and abused, and he's allowed himself to be because he's just a monster of a man. Enough said. If you've got him as your running back 1, you can't not play him because I think they're going to have to play through him. But I'm really interested to see where else it'll go. D-Hop, I think, is going to be really interesting. Obviously, D-Hop missed, I think, 6 games last year for PEDs and then didn't come back and came back and wasn't fantastic. He's yet again been moved away for peanuts. Literally nothing. I think he was cut this year after he got moved to peanuts from the Texans. He's back in the Texans? Yes, he was in the Texans. He's back in the AFC South. I think he's got a grudge to set right against the Texans, even though it's completely different regime now. He's going to be great, and I think he's going to make Chigakonkwo great. I think if you're looking at 2 targets, it's going to be D-Hop and Chigakonkwo because the rest of them are just a bunch of guys. Chigakonkwo is that sleeper tight end who showed well in his rookie season in spurts. Is he going to have a second-year breakout? I certainly hope so. Right, moving on to possibly the worst division, but it's got some really interesting players, the NFC South. And we'll start off with the Falcons. The Falcons who, you know what, I'm going to come out and say they're my pick to win this division and maybe surprise someone in the playoffs. Bijan Robinson is going to be Bijan Robinson. They're going to run the ball a lot, and he is going to get a huge amount. I was talking to someone the other day about whether he is reliable. I don't think he has to be. His flaw is he stays on the field and he gets volume because they run running backs into the ground. His height is RB1. So providing he stays healthy, I think he's going to be a reliable asset for you. But the guy I really like on this team is probably going to be Drake London. And I'm going to talk about him in the context with Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is such a highly drafted guy that everyone thinks he's got to make it work. He was a number 8 pick. Well, do you know who else was a really highly touted pick? TJ Hockenson. He was moved on and became something later on. I don't think just because you were highly drafted as a tight end means you're going to be played in that way. He's not a pass blocker. No, he was fantastic in college. Yes, he was used as a wide receiver. Fantastic. This is not a throwing team, and when they do throw it, they look to find someone who's got really good separation and hasn't got 2 guys on him, because Pitts demands 2 guys on him just because of his sheer physicality, and that is Drake London. Drake London, I think, is going to be a fantastic wide receiver 2 option for anyone who's picked him up. He was cheap in that regard, and I recommend if you can trade for a share of Drake London this year, I think he's going to be the passing option. If it's not going to be Bijan, it's going to be Drake London. Right. The Saints. Saints are a weird team. I do not like it. But I do at the same time. I don't like Derek Carr. I think that was a boring choice. Although, choice at quarterback is a thing. I think they maybe should have gone with famous Jameis and just hurled the ball down. Derek Carr is maybe going to do that a little bit, and I hope he will get a bit of cadence with Olave. I think Olave will get better if Michael Thomas stays on the field as well. But a player that I'm really interested in see if he can find his way forward, and I've referenced him already when I was talking about the Lions, is Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara, don't condone what he did. Everyone saw the TMZ footage, but he settled and got 3-game suspension for breach of conduct or something like that. I don't know, silly. He is so good, so good when he's good. I remember having him in a championship week and him scoring 6 touchdowns or something stupid. He can be their offense. I think that could be to the detriment of Olave, and I think they may be a bit more balanced, and maybe they're not going to quite lean as heavily on Kamara. But I think they will do, because he is by far and away more talented than, I hate to say this, Jamal Williams, because he's the nicest guy, and Kendra Miller. Kamara will come in and dominate touches in that backfield. He is a better runner than people give him credit for. He's a better wide receiver than most people on that lineup. And he is just a fantastic player who I have got a lot of shares of. The Bucks are going to be bad. I'm sorry. I believe there's a couple of fellows listening to this podcast who are Bucks fans. I just don't think they're going to be good, but I think they're going to be good for fantasy. Mike Evans is a really interesting prospect because I think he's given until Saturday to basically give a new contract, or he's going to hold out or trade him or something, but sort that out. But he could be interesting, and he was my pick as a massive sleeper. I think Goldwyn is going to be a safe floor. Mike Evans in half PPR and standard, at the very least, it should be fantastic because Baker can throw it. I think he's probably a bit upset because he has to be thrown to by Baker, if that makes sense. And he wants to go to a contender, but if he does play, I think he will be interesting for fantasy because he doesn't not get 1,000-yard seasons. I think his worst in this last run of 8-9 years, whatever it's going to be, is 1,001 yards. And you want that, and especially when you can pick him up at wide receiver 3 prices. People will be looking to trade him away. Pick the dip. Take a dip. Even if he sits out for a couple of games, he will be fantastic for you. The question is, who's going to be their running back? It's probably going to be Rashad White, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some Sean Tucker in there. I'm not sure if they have the faith in him. Yes, he was a volume play. I think he was lucky last year that he got so many targets in the backfield, 50 targets, which I think was most amongst rookie running backs. I don't believe he's going to be the answer for them long term, though. And finally, we will finish with the Panthers, who traded for the number 1 pick. I don't know why I've put Stroud here. I haven't put Stroud. Someone else put Stroud. Because I was originally planning on doing this as a head-to-head. But no, it's not CJ Stroud. Obviously, you've got Bryce Young over at the Panthers. Bryce Young, there's been no hype around him. And I think for fantasy, that's probably safe. But I think he could grow into something. And I think we could see him get the offensive rookie of the year because I think he will show out performances. And I think he'll be very heavily reliant on people like Adam Thielen, which is crazy to say because Adam Thielen was basically going free in drafts, and Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders, I think, could have an RB2 level performance, but I don't think, based on their O-line, it's going to be fantastic. He's going to have to pick and choose his opportunities and make sure he converts in the red zone, which is something he wasn't really allowed to do when he was at the Eagles, mainly because you had the biggest red zone threat in Jalen Hurts. They're going to be interesting in the course of this division, but I think in terms of the NFC as a whole, they're going to be nothing. They maybe could go back-to-back worst team, or they weren't worst team, but I think they could be down in the dumps there because it definitely feels like a rebuild. They need offensive line help. They haven't targeted that hugely in the free agency period. I think Bryce Young is going to get beaten up, but I think he's going to get experience out of that overall. So out of the South teams, I think that I've already picked the Jags as my pick for the AFC South and the Falcons, but I think they're going to be bad either way. I think this is going to be a 9 or 10 win team, maybe even 8 for the Falcons, probably 10 for the Jags, but it's going to be that kind of range to get into the playoffs. But I think the Jags could surprise people down the stretch. Anyway, that is your lot for today. It was a long old episode, and it's probably going to be a bit more for me to edit this now. So I'll hopefully get this out to you for Friday. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this kind of content and just talking generally around fantasy football and giving you some ideas about some players who you might not have thought about, I might do this again mid-season. I think it's going to be interesting. Week 1 coming up tonight. So this has been recorded on the Thursday. Week 1 coming up tonight. Yeah, I really don't know what we know yet, because everything is based off history, preseason. We don't know what people are actually going to play like, and we probably won't know until week 3 or 4. But yeah, if you like this kind of content, I'll probably do an update of this. I will try and do a head-to-head version of this in season. As always, if you like this kind of content, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, all of the places at Rugby with Pads. You can support the pod, rugbywithpads.com, or go to store.rugbywithpads.com. You can go straight to our Etsy if you want to get the merch without the membership. That's a thing you can do now as well, and support local business, all that fun stuff. Thank you so much for listening. I will probably see you. You'll hear from me in the next couple of days. Find me on YouTube, on Spotify, everywhere you listen. Give us a like and subscribe. I will see you all on the virtual gridiron very soon.